Hey guys, welcome to another whiskey review. My name is Andrew, and this week we've got a bourbon to review. This particular bourbon is the Old Forester 1897, as they call it. It is a straight Kentucky bourbon whiskey, and it is produced, wouldn't you know, by the Old Forester Distillery. The Old Forester Distillery is in fact not a distillery, but a label produced at the Brown-Forman Distillery, although the two are essentially synonymous. The Brown-Forman Distillery is located in Shively, Kentucky, just outside of Louisville. However, they are just about done with what I believe is going to be a massive new state-of-the-art distillery smack dab in the middle of downtown Louisville. That's supposed to open sometime next year. Late spring 2018. The Old Forester label, like I said, is pretty much synonymous with Brown-Forman and has a pretty storied history in the bourbon whiskey scene, according to at least history as Old Forester tells it. I'm pretty sure if you checked with like Chuck Cowdery or some bourbon historian, it's true. But according to fable or lore or whatever, Old Forester is the longest continuously produced bourbon in the world, dating all the way back to 1870. This bourbon has never not been in production. It also, and what is becoming increasingly rare, has always been owned by the same owner. It was actually started by the person who started Brown-Forman and has stayed in the Brown-Forman portfolio ever since, which is pretty rare that it's never had a different owner. It stayed American in ownership, that is, and it stayed within the same family even, which is pretty cool, I guess. What else can I tell you about Brown-Forman? You probably know them best for Jack Daniels. Brown-Forman owns Jack Daniels, the best-selling whiskey in the entire world, I believe, as of last year. I think it passed Johnny Walker to claim that title. They also own Woodford Reserve, and they recently actually delved into the Scotch industry with the purchase of the trio of distilleries, Glendronach, Ben Riach. I don't remember the third one. Anyway, back to Old Forester itself. All of Old Forester's whiskeys share the same mash bill: 72% corn, 18% rye, 10% barley malt, which would make this a fairly high rye bourbon comparative to a lot of its peers. This particular bourbon, the 1897, is part of Old Forester's Whiskey Row series, which includes an 1870 and a 1920. They're each named after the date of a significant event in Old Forester's history. This 1897, as you can see, it is bottled in bond. It is named after the year that the Bottled in Bond Act was passed into law. So, let's dive in. We'll give some tasting notes. We'll give a score. We'll add a little water. Let's get on with it, shall we? Old Forester 1897. First thing I notice is a nice hefty dose of like caramel custard. It's like equal parts sweet caramel, creamy vanilla, and it's pretty bold. It's pretty unctuous. I really like it right off the bat. Kind of jumps out at your nose. That's kind of overlaid with like a dusting of cinnamon, sawdust, a bit more of a drier spice note, which complements it really well. And deeper in, there's actually some hints of like sauteed apples, cooked apples, maybe even a little peach in there. Really yummy nose. There's not really any tickle, nothing that would suggest that, this is high alcohol. It's 100 proof. Anything bottled in bond is always 100 proof or 50% alcohol by volume. Overall, this is a pretty complex nose. There's quite a bit going on. It's a little thin, it's a little jumbled, but overall, it's enjoyable. Let's move on to the palate. Right off the bat, the first thing I notice is something kind of like pencil shavings. That accompanies a fairly mild entry burn, and then they both kind of fade out to give way to some actual enjoyable flavors, things like more of that apple, a sautéed apple note, um, baking spice, butterscotch. On the tail end, it starts to get bitter, things like charcoal. Um, it has a really soft body, a really soft mouthfeel, which I really enjoy. The mouthfeel is actually probably my favorite thing about the palate. The flavor profile, those flavors I described, they're a little harsh, they're a little thin again, and unfortunately that kind of pencil shaving note you get on entry kind of sticks out like a sore thumb here. I really like the whole apple butterscotch thing that they've got going. The charcoal is a nice accent note to those sweeter fruit and sweet notes, but that pencil shaving, kind of dry woody note, at least to me, it's not the best. Let's do another sip, we'll get the finish. The finish kind of starts off for the palate left with kind of a bitter charcoal. You do get some more almost like French toast or sweet roll notes that come in. Some more cinnamon, nutmeg, drier dessert baking spices. And as it continues to sit and linger, which this is a pretty powerful finish, it really is lingering. There's a little bit more of a white fruit sneaking back in here late in the finish, which I didn't find on the palate, besides that kind of stewed apple note. But I'm talking about like that kind of pear peach complex that I found a little bit on the nose, creeping back in on the finish, which is nice. It leaves a nice end to this dram, which overall was kind of up and down for me, I'll admit. There are parts of the nose that I really liked. I would call the nose probably the highlight. The palate was a low point for me, especially initially. It doesn't really greet you the kindest. You get that harsh pencil shaving, an alcohol note before it kind of gets into the sweeter, tastier notes. And then the finish kind of evens it back out, kind of saves the day, as you will. I'll go ahead and give this a score, and I'll tell you a little bit more about why I'm giving it the score I'm giving it. $80 out of 100, which may actually seem on the high side. The way that my true 100-point scale works, 80 out of 100 would actually just be barely creeping into what I would call an excellent whiskey, beyond good and into the low side of excellent, if you will. The reason I feel confident giving it that score is because I really do like the complexity of flavors here. I love the fruit, the sweet, the spice, the bitter. They're not the most cohesive. They're a little unrefined. Parts of it are a little harsh. And that's the reason that despite the complexity of flavors, it's not higher. But despite the unrefinedness, the harshness, which would probably have it a lot lower, that complexity really elevates it, in my opinion. I love drams that aren't one-dimensional, that aren't simple. They actually give you something to ponder when you're tasting it, when you've got it in your mouth. So that said, maybe this isn't the best whiskey to just throw back, but there is stuff here to enjoy, stuff here to think about. And overall, that said, this is a tasty whiskey. It has its flaws, but it is tasty. And so 80 out of 100 is what I'm going to give it. We'll add a little bit of water see if that changes anything. Rather than my normal distilled water and a quarter teaspoon, check this out. I've got some legitimate old limestone mixing water that my friend Greg sent me straight out of Kentucky, I'm assuming. So we'll go ahead and add a little bit of it, this. There will be a video where I will compare this Kentucky limestone mixing water with my normal distilled water to see if I can kind of bust the myth that this Kentucky limestone water is much superior to regular distilled water. At least I kind of hope I can bust the myth, because I don't really want to spend money to import bottles of water from Kentucky. So that'll come up eventually, but let's see if a few drops of Kentucky limestone water makes any improvement on this guy. It sweetens the nose, it brings out a lot more vanilla. It's a little bit more of a creamier, almost fudgier vanilla. Think blonde fudge here. A thicker vanilla, which I do like. It takes away a lot of the complexity, a lot of the fruit, a lot of the spice. But I would say it thickens the nose, and it really adds the vanilla. On the palate, funny enough, adding a little bit of water actually improves the mouthfeel even more. It already had a really nice, soft mouthfeel to begin with. It's an even fuller mouthfeel with the water added. Who would have guessed? That being said, it causes that pencil shaving note to kind of be even more pervasive, to really kind of linger further into the palate than it did without the water. And so for that reason, I'm enjoying it less with the water. And on the finish, the water kind of gives it more of a raw spirit, grainy note that kind of sneaks in and overwhelms some of the finer flavors. So overall, I've got to say I like this better without the water. If I were to score this with water, I'd probably drop it down to maybe like a 73 or 74. So, in conclusion, this is a very good whiskey. At the $50 price tag approximately, sure, you can find better whiskeys for $50. Absolutely you can. Better bourbons for $50. But I would recommend this to anybody who likes Old Forester. It's going to be a step up, I think, from your more basic bottom shelf Old Foresters, like the Signature and the 86 proof and those. If you do like those, give this a try. It'd probably be a good treat for you. Otherwise, if you're into the drier bourbons, if you're into the higher rye bourbons, if you're into actually thinking about what you're drinking, give this a try. I think there's stuff here to enjoy. Otherwise, think twice about picking this over something else that you know you enjoy. So, that's it. I'll be back soon with another whiskey review. I've done 2 weeks of bourbon now, so we'll see where I land next week. But have a great night, guys. Cheers.